again, welcome all of you to our session today, and I'm excited to have you here. So as Mia talked about earlier, sometimes when you hear about speaking, you guys think about all the formal speaking. I don't speak in front of thousands of people, and I don't do this, but today is really about the everyday communication interactions that you get engaged in. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions. I want this to be interactive. Number one, how many of you consider yourself a public speaker? Raise your hand. Okay, not necessarily everybody. Okay. How many of you believe that anyone can learn to speak? Okay, a few more of you. Okay, so what do you think about when you hear the word speaker? Just shout out some words. What do you think about when you hear the word speaker? Subject matter expert. Anybody? Knowledgeable. Okay. Confidence. Inspirer. Okay. Educator, communicator, all of those things. So I want to make sure we operate from a common definition as we go through this today. And it's any form of communication. Oral communication is what we're going to define as a speaker today. So every time you open your mouth in public, you are a public speaker. So I'm going to ask you again, how many people in the room are a public speaker? All right. You are in public and you are speaking. So that's our definition today. I'm going to pass this around real quickly just for you to take around. But this lists kind of all the interactions that we use to speak. And I'm sure this is not all of them. But take a look at them, and I just want you to quickly circle as many of these that you find yourself interacting with on a day-to-day basis. And while you're doing that, I'm going to share some statistics about speaking skills and how important speaking skills are to our everyday interactions and, most importantly, our careers. So statistics say that if you have not developed your speaking skills, you're likely to earn about 10% less than the person who does speak extremely well. You guys believe that? And then it has about a 15% impact on promotions. Particularly if you think about moving into leadership levels or C-suite type levels, communication skills and your ability to speak in different audiences and different levels are extremely important. And this is the one that really got me. Statistics say there's about 5% annual revenue loss due to poor communication and poor presentation skills. So I'm sure we can all think about interactions we've been in when the presentations haven't been great, or how many times if you worked in organizations and you have teams that are not necessarily clicking from a communication standpoint, it could cause some revenue loss. But 5%, depending upon how large you are, that's a lot of money to leave on the table. Would you guys agree? So again, my objective today, we're not going to dive deep because it's a lunch and learn, but we're going to just talk about some of the basic principles that everybody could use to take their speaking game up to the next level. So my speaking experience has been a little bit by chance. So I remember my very first speaking experience was in high school, and my parents entered me into this oratorical contest. And I remember we had to memorize it. And I remember getting halfway through the speech and having a complete blank. Could not remember a single word, not another sentence on the rest of that presentation. And so I stood there, which seemed like hours. It was probably only a few minutes. And I honestly just had to take my seat. I could not remember a single word of the rest of my presentation that I had practiced so hard on. And so you could imagine my fear of speaking after a situation like that. And then I remember going on to run for student council president and having to do another speech, upon which I said I wasn't going to memorize it. I was going to read it because I had this huge fear of memorization. So early on, I started to build this paradigm of what public speaking was really about, and there's this horrifying experience. Do you guys know what the number one phobia people have now about public speaking? It's not the number one phobia is public speaking. It's number one to death and fear of spiders. Can you believe that? That people would rather die than to stand up in front and speak to people. That just kind of blew my mind. So I've had the opportunity, because I've had to, through 26 years in corporate America, I've had to do a lot of speaking, so I've had to kind of grow up in it and learn how to do it pretty quickly. But I want to share this with you. I have a 12-year-old now, and it's funny how when you grow up in a household and you do a lot of these things, your kids start to take after you, right? So he decided, he's 12 now, at 8 years old, he decided he was going to run for vice president of his student council. So he did his speech, he won, and he was the vice president. Next year, he's decided he wanted to be the president. And so he had to do another speech. So I want to play a clip for you guys, because this, in terms of how can anybody learn to speak.
My name is Christopher Kirk, and I'm your current student council vice president, seeking your continued support as your next president of student council. There are three things that separate me from my fellow candidates. One, my experience. Two, my proven track record. And three, my leadership. This is an unbeatable combination and a winning formula for another successful year. First, my experience. I've been a member of Student Council for the past 2 years. First, as Student Council representative, and currently serving as your Vice President. I've had the opportunity to shadow and learn the ropes from our current President Kai. In addition, I had the opportunity to experience River East across several areas. TAG, Math Olympiad, Robotics, Eagle Flyers, and Reflections. Experience is the best teacher. Vote Christopher for experience. Secondly, I have proven results. In my speech last year, I promised three things. One, to have another great talent show. Check. Two, to give back to the community with the best canned food drive and raise more money. I led this by example by being the #1 male booster-thon fundraiser at River East and led our class to a #1 finish in the canned food drive. Check. And three, continue to be engineered for success. I had the opportunity to represent all of you at the State STEM Day in Athens, Georgia, sharing all the great work we do around STEM. Check. Dennis Whitley said, the results you achieve will be in direct proportion to the effort you supply. Vote Christopher for results.
He's not done. I'm not going to play the whole thing. So after you want to clap, you can clap for him. The outcome is he did not win. He should have won, not just from a biased parent, but he should have won. But, so it begs the question, natural speaker? Is there such thing as a natural speaker? What do you guys think? You think there's a natural speaker? Okay, okay. Or do you feel like, so you feel like everybody is a natural speaker that speaks well? No? So we're going to do a quick exercise. I want you guys to stand up. We're going to talk a little bit about natural. This is a little bit of a tight room, so you won't be able to use your partners like you want. So I want you to just stand, and I want you to make sure you're balanced first, so hold on to the table. I want you to lift your right foot up. For those of you in heels, be careful, and notice what happens. So just stand there. Now put your hands out to the side. Put it back down. See if you can raise your knee a little higher, and notice kind of what's happening. Okay, go ahead and put your leg down. When anybody twists their ankle. What did you notice when you did that? You're trying to balance. Your left foot was adjusting for balance, right? Were you consciously thinking about that, or was it kind of happening on its own? Happening on its own. Okay, do the other leg. Now, while you're doing that, I want you to count backwards from 47. You can do it to yourself. Okay, you can put your foot down. Again, your foot was adjusting for you, right? Were you consciously saying move a little bit to the left, move a little bit to the right? You weren't. It was happening automatically. Why was it happening automatically? The brain. How did that happen? We learned a long time ago how to balance, right? When we learned to walk, right? And we took steps, and now it's become part of what? Subconscious mind, right? So you don't have to think about it anymore. So have a seat. So why is that important? So our body does things we don't control subconsciously. We learn from experiences. So again, that balancing thing we learned over time from when we were a child on how to balance. So we don't have to consciously think about it now. We learn in many different ways, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and I can't say the word. You can read it. Opportunity and repetition are key to learning. So how many times did we walk and fall? How many times did we run and fall? How many times did we crawl and fall over? It was repetition that allowed us to continue to do that. So now when we balance, it happens automatically. Same thing happens in speaking. So I'm told many times, oh, you're just so natural at it. But if you knew how many hours, how much time we've been spent to learn how to speak and tweak and adjust, you would no longer say it's a natural speaker. Now, what I think you are seeing is that there are, when people's habits are just taking over, it appears natural. It appears conversational. That's the piece that you're seeing as natural, but it's not the skill itself that became natural. You had to work at it. So we just talked about that subconscious mind is powerful. So when you think about you as a speaker, your subconscious will drive a lot of your behaviors. So how many of you, when you speak, you get really nervous? Anybody still get really nervous when they speak? Or at one time you got really nervous when you spoke? Have you ever had yourself videotaped and you later watched, and did you notice? I remember watching one of my tapes and I didn't realize I was doing my foot like this. I was like, oh my God, like, did I really stand up there for 15 minutes and play with my foot? Was it subconscious or conscious? Subconscious, right? It was just a bad habit. It was a nervous twitch. Or did you notice anything else that you did in that speaking when you watched the video that you didn't realize you were doing? That's subconscious behavior. Similarly, when you're talking to an audience on the right, they have subconscious things going on as well. They've already sized you up. You guys have done the same thing to me based on what you see or what you don't see or what you anticipate I'm going to say or not say. So you're working against the subconscious mind, both as the speaker and also as the audience, on what they're receiving from you from a perception standpoint. So this subconscious thing is really important as we talk about honing in on our speaking skills. So there's a gentleman by the name of Albert, and I can't pronounce his last name, but he really talked about the importance of nonverbal and verbal elements of speaking and communicating. So he talked about how words are important, combined with our voice, combined with our delivery. And all three of those things together make an awesome speaking experience to audience experience. Well, how many of you guys have seen this? Anybody seen that before? Who can tell me what those numbers mean?
55% of what you present is your body language, 38% is tone of voice, and 7% is your words.
Yes. Does that surprise anybody? But think back to when you first started speaking at all. Where did you spend most of your time? Words, right? Because it's like it matters what I'm saying. Or how many of you guys have gone to a presentation and you said, you know what, the speaker really didn't say anything that profound, but everybody loved them. Why is that? They had great voice, they had great body language, they were relatable, they connected. So you really didn't pay attention to what they said, right? But there's other times when you say, oh my God, they were horrible, right? They didn't say, everything they said wasn't right because the body language wasn't good, the voice delivery wasn't good, so you honed in on what they were saying. So these three things in combination are really, really, really important as you continue to hone in on your speaking skills. So I want to reiterate that everybody in here has situations where they're doing a lot of the activities that we have on that piece of paper. You're not always standing up in front of a group of people formally having a conversation. A lot of our conversations, how many of you guys are on conference calls a lot throughout the day? Right? We're not even seeing people anymore. We're on the telephone constantly.
Yes,
so how?
7% of that.
Right. So that you bring up a good point. So think about how important is it? So we talked about body language was the most important piece to this communication thing. But when you think about our modes of communication and how it shifted, we're not doing a lot of face-to-face anymore. So what does that mean? You could focus on your body language all day long, but nobody's seeing it. So now your words are just as important if you're on a conference call. Now body language will come through in your energy level, right? And in the words that you select. But 7% now becomes more important on conference calls. So what do you think the adjustments you have to make in your preparation? You have to focus just as much on what you're saying now because you don't have the benefit of 55% of your communication coming through in body language. So it's important to keep these three things kind of in the proper perspective depending upon the mode that you're communicating in. So if you're doing a lot of virtual, you've got to really be cognizant of how these three things are going to come through over the telephone and what impact and influence are you going to have on the other end and what perceptions are you driving through the conversations over the telephone because people can't see the rest of you, right? So it's important that all of this work in concert with one another to present the best product to the other end. Is it working?
Yeah.
All right, so 3 key areas to speaking success. First one is you as the messenger. We're talking about the person and the voice. The second one is the message itself, what you're communicating, what's your objective. And the last one is the audience. So we've already kind of talked about this. Which area is most important to focus on out of these 3?
Audience.
Audience, why?
Because if you're not speaking to their, wherever they are already, then anything you say is going to be useless.
Right.
Yeah.
They determine your success, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how, all the notes I might have written out here. If I don't connect, if I'm not talking and meeting your needs, it doesn't matter, right? But again, where are we spending most of our time? On average, maybe not this group, because the message, right? Well, the message doesn't matter if it's not what the audience wants to hear. If you guys came in here to hear about speaking and I started talking about sales, would I be successful today? Even if I delivered a great sales presentation, you'd be like, but I thought we were talking about speaking. You were highly disappointed. So you guys determine a speaker's success. The audience does, right? So you have to spend time understanding your audience as a component to determining your message and then determining how you deliver it. So let's break each one of these down. All right, so the first one is about the messenger. This is about you as the speaker. And again, I want you to think about speaking broadly as any oral communication in a public setting. Okay, so whether that's a one-on-one you're having here at the table, whether you're sitting at your boss's desk having an update conversation, or whether you're on a conference call talking to your team. You want to make sure you know yourself in terms of what character am I portraying? What's my body language? How many of you guys have been in a meeting and noticed that somebody's kind of disengaged? Kind of rolling their eyes at what's being said. They're not saying anything, but it's communicating a whole lot, right? Everything we do or don't do communicates something, whether it's positive or whether it's negative. So you want to be mindful of kind of how you're wired and how am I showing up in all of these different environments. What's my vocal delivery saying? Hey, Dawn, do you agree with that? Yeah, I guess so. That's different than, yes, I'm on board, right? Totally different. So I might be saying one thing, but my tone is saying something completely different. And I think, as we think about the roles that we may have here, they always say it's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? I think of how many people in here are parents? And how many of you had to help kids apologize to each other? And you say sorry. Sorry. It's like, no, now say it like you mean it. So again, your tone makes a difference in terms of how those words are being received. So think about that in the importance in the context of all your business dealings. Is your vocal tone or anything sending a signal that you didn't intend to send? Or does it match the words that are coming out of your mouth? I always say, is the audio matching the video? Right? Either way, are you intentional about that audio and video? And then the last one is personality. At the end of the day, people enjoy talking with people that are exciting to talk with. Have you ever had conversation with people and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, I could just pluck my eyeballs out, or it's like watching paint dry. It's like they don't get excited about anything. They're just kind of monotone and, don't get easily excitable. And it's just, so personality matters as well as part of your total package in terms of how you're being received by your audience. And I will stand back up. So one of the things, let me go back 1 second. So I was just sitting down, right? Which sometimes say, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes I feel like I can connect better if we're sitting down and having a more intimate conversation. But research tells you when you stand up, you're likely to get 43% more influence by just standing up, because you can now command the room. You also take control of how information is flowing when you stand up. And if you have a tool in your hand or you're using a PowerPoint, that extends your influence even more. So if you're sitting around a meeting table, and this is just things and tips for, this is not, the average person's not going to know this. So if you're sitting in a relaxed environment, always stand up if they didn't tell you that you couldn't. So if you notice, some people, when they go around the room and introduce themselves, some people, no matter what, always stand up. They do that. They may not be conscious about it, but their level of influence rises automatically because they stood up. Everybody else is sitting down. So you command, think about presence. If you're in a boardroom, think about, especially as women sometimes, right? We don't always have the equal seat at the table. So we have to use these tools to extend our presence and speaking influence in these work situations. So definitely file that one away. 43 more likely to persuade the listener when you stand up. So I don't care if everybody else is sitting down on the floor. You stand up in the room and command people's attentions and take your influence in your rightful place. All right, knowing your audience. What are some of the things you guys are doing today? If you have, again, remember I'm talking speaker broadly now, not just the formal speaking, to make sure you know your audience. Anybody?
Research.
Research? What kind of research? How are you getting your research?
Mostly from who my contact is or who I'm going in to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
I find out, am I talking to adults? Am I talking to children? What are the ages? Male, female? All just whatever I can get.
Whatever you can get.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tailor my presentation.
Tailor your presentation. What are some of the other things you guys are doing to get to know your audience?
I try to anticipate some of the questions so I can have some answers.
Excellent. Excellent.
And ask them questions when you start.
Yep.
I mean, especially in smaller groups, if you can say, like I do financial literacy workshops, so I say, these are going to be our topics throughout the sessions.
Mhm.
But if there's other information you need, then let me know.
Right.
And we'll add it in so that I'm actually meeting your needs. Otherwise, why are you going to waste your time?
Right. What if you don't have the luxury of getting research done? So I'll give you a prime example. I didn't know who was going to be here today specifically. However, I know kind of the DNA of the club itself, right? But what I did, I just kind of walked around, made sure I introduced myself, and I think, don't tell me. Starts with an H. Harold? No. Tell me. Howard. I asked him, I said, what interested you in the topic today? What's one challenge are you having with speaking? So even just before your presentation or before the meeting, just going around and having a casual, informal conversation with people, just to kind of gut check, okay, is what I'm about to talk about going to hit the mark, or do I need to make a few tweaks maybe just before I speak? And one other rule of thumb is, particularly if you're going to an event, anybody heard of the 60-20 rule? Arrive 60 minutes early. Make sure you're all set up. The first 40 minutes is set up. 20 minutes is informal, getting to talk to the people entering the room. And I've observed this for a lot of speakers. And do you typically see them interacting before they speak? Some do, some don't. But I tell you, the ones that don't, they don't connect as well. Because you don't really know who you're talking to, so you're probably a little more uptight. As the audience, you're not as connected yet, and you're kind of saying, well, let me see what they're about, right? So you have a little more of a critical eye before they start talking. But if you've interacted with them a little bit beforehand, would you agree it seems a lot more conversational, seems a lot more relational? Maybe you can use somebody's name when you're talking, right? Sorry, I didn't remember. I knew it was an H. I knew it was an H. And I usually do my name tag. Yeah, exactly. But I knew Dawn because we had the same name. And Tiffany.
I haven't always done it.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to start doing it because now you make me think about the times where I have done it. People are more likely to come up after
Yes.
the
Yes.
engagement, and then those become contacts that
Yes.
lead to whatever they lead to.
Yeah. And they engage with you while you're talking, right?
Yeah. So a lot of times I don't let them know I'm the speaker, and I just interact with them.
Oh, okay.
And then they'll come up later like, I didn't know you were
Exactly, but it works. People do business with people they like or that are approachable or conversational. So these are all tips. Like I said, that's why I wanted to make sure you guys knew that what we're going to talk about is everyday interactions on how you connect and engage with people, not just the big stage stuff. But yeah, I even use name tags sometimes so I can call out their names. Another little cheat sheet, you can make a little seating chart. Oh, and when you meet people, here's the names so that you can call out names and say, hey, when we were talking beforehand, you shared this with me, and bring them into your conversation. But you can always continue to ask questions. You can search websites, all kind of research available to us today to find out who your audience is and make sure you're tailoring it. One of the things I always noticed for the kind of some top speakers is like, you know what? I've heard them speak several times now, and their content really is the same word-wise, but how they used it to meet the audience's needs is what transitioned. And I know that helped me tremendously because I kept thinking that every time I spoke, I needed new content. I was like, I'm going to kill myself trying to do new content. But you tweak it based on the audiences that you're talking to. So keep that in mind. Again, whether it's one person sitting one-on-one that you're talking to, a group like this, or you're on a stage with thousands of people, the process is the same. And that's what I want you guys to make the connection to, that the formal, professional speaker, the process is really the same to make sure you have maximum communication skills. So down at the bottom it says the quickest way to connect is by demonstrating that you understand their business, their issues, and their concerns. And there's a book that I use religiously, and I'll share it with you guys. It's called The Exceptional Presenter. And Howard, I know you talked about the structure sometime of workshops and all that. There's a great format and framework that no matter what type of talk you're doing, it kind of walks you through the elements to create your content. And the author's name is Timothy J. Coeagle. But same structure no matter whether you're doing a one-on-one conversation, you're doing a conference call. J. Coeagle, can you see it? But great roadmap. I mean, I pulled it out in the last few days just to remind myself of the structure and organization. It takes you through a lot of these key steps and questions for yourself. So you want to meet them where they are, you want to connect on the common ground, you want to solve their problems, and most importantly, you want to establish credibility in the room. Any other questions on this one from knowing your audience? All right, the next one, is know your material. So we talked about know your material, or the words you're going to say represented what percent? 7. But it's still important, right? You can't just get up there and do a lot of body language. You got to say something. You see? Just point, be very demonstrative, and sit down. So you do have to say something. But knowing your material has several elements, right? It's not only just the words you choose to use. It's stories that you tell to help make the principles come to life. It's the examples that you use. And it's your level of energy and excitement. And sometimes it's difficult to have energy and excitement if you happen to get an audience that's just staring at you. Have you guys ever had that happen where you ask a question, nobody says a word, you can't tell if they're enjoying you or just can't wait for you to sit down, but you still got to stay up there and finish your thing, right? And the hardest thing is for you to exude energy anyway, in spite of. So that excitement, your energy will help hopefully bring the audience along. Sometimes it takes a little longer than others, and I usually try to make a joke out of it. So if I ask a question and they don't respond, I'm like, okay, let's try that again, right? So this is all very important. But I put 2 words up here that I think we totally underestimate: preparation and practice. So I must share a little secret, because I'm often told, oh, you're so natural, you speak so well. And I said, but if you only knew, and my husband will tell you, I prepare everything. Even impromptu commentary at the end of a program, I have prepared. Not so much in advance of the thing, but I'm listening so intently. It's like, okay, if they call on me to I hate impromptu stuff. Like, I don't like being called on the spot. But when you're in leadership, you have to be prepared to be called on the spot. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to be caught with not what to say again. So when other people are talking, I'm constantly taking notes. I said, if I get called up there and I need to give a summary or say something, I start preparing my remarks even before I know I have to speak. If I don't have to speak, great. I had the notes ready and all is good. We can have a one-on-one conversation about it later. But if I happen to get called up, I will not look crazy with nothing to say. So that's preparation. Didn't necessarily get to practice it, but it was preparation. Conference calls with a team. I wrote my conference call stuff notes out. Here's what I'm going to say in the opening. Here are the 3 or 4 points we want to get across. Here's the point where I'm going to ask for questions. All of it, preparation. So don't underestimate preparation so that you can make sure you're very deliberate and intentional in getting the outcomes that you want from your interactions that you're having, whether it be one-on-one, a group, or a whole audience of people. And sometimes people say, well, I don't have time to prepare. You don't have time not to, because you may not get a second chance to make a what? First impression. Exactly. And even though 7% is only 7% of what you say, it's still a huge part, because you didn't call the meeting, you didn't engage in the interaction just because. You had a goal and you had an objective and you had a reason for doing it, right? 9 times out of 10, whether it's a sales call or a discovery conversation, Mia, on seeing if we're going to work together. But are you not preparation for anybody that sits down with you?
All the time. Like, I have a client 2 weeks from now, and I spent the day yesterday preparing, and I actually called her on the phone and I said, I know we're not meeting for 2 weeks, but I just have a couple of quick questions, because the more prepared you are, the better you can maximize the
Absolutely.
time of your audience and your own time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we already talked about the 60-20 rule. So what percentage of your working day are you spending communicating? All day. So would you say 100%? Pretty darn close. 90%? Now let me ask you the second question to that. How much time are you spending preparing for those conversations? Are they just happening? So, some of them just happen, and some of them are instantaneous, right? But for those bigger, more important meetings, a meeting with your boss, a meeting with a client, how much time are you spending preparing? You don't have to answer out loud. But I guarantee you we can all prepare more. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. So we can make sure we get the desired outcomes. So again, my husband asked me, he's like, I'm up late. Doesn't matter how far in advance, how much notice I have. Part of my preparation process is I write everything. I write everything. You laugh because you were at the lab. I write everything. And I may not use it.
I laugh because my wife is the same way.
Yeah.
So we agreed that there's different preparation
Mm-hmm.
styles.
Yes.
Because I don't have to write everything down.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I'm going to say, and I write down things.
Yep.
But I don't have to write word for word and, but, if, then. I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's a personality
It is. Yeah.
thing too, because she's more of a melancholy, so she has to have it in her mind, and she don't even use it.
That's me. I don't use it 9 times out of 10 either.
Right.
It's part of the practice for me.
Right, like, it's just writing it down as part of her thing, but she already knows the content.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I can't stand role playing it out loud. I hate doing it out loud. So writing it for me is my substitute for saying it out loud in advance. It's just something weird about it. It's weird for me. I'd rather come in and do it with somebody live than to pretend I'm, every now and then I'll just read what I wrote to Tony and say, hey, did you hear anything? Does it flow? That type of thing. But I don't do it in my real delivery format. I've just never been able to do that. So, but preparation is key. I've heard a comment.
I'll say yeah, be easy.
Yeah, this feels weird to me. So again, if you get all those things we just talked about right, then you're probably going to start to get the comments that you're a very natural speaker. But is it true that you're a real natural speaker? Because when people say you're a natural speaker, they're really saying you didn't train. You just got it like that. You're just built to speak. It's a natural talent for you. That's what they mean when they say you're natural. So in that sense of the definition, some people could, but what they're really seeing is the hours and days and weeks of preparation that you've put into it. And when it comes across conversational, that's what they're seeing as natural. So when you do all the things that we talked about and you do it repetitively over and over again, yes?
Would you please speak to your money story? I get confused about which story is the money story.
The money?
Yeah, I'm from the South, and I've heard people say that you need to have a money story, and I'm not clear about that. Is that
A money story like when you're speaking?
I guess
Is part of your content or is one of your examples? I've not heard that.
just say, I guess, to get somebody to really.
like a close,
Okay. You talking about, yeah,
Pitching like a programmer.
yeah. I think it depends upon what you're selling and what your outcome of your talk is. So, for example, and your audience is. So, for example, you see on TV all the time people pitching stuff, right? Or even on YouTube or what have you. And they're telling you all their information. They're telling you all the reasons. At the end, they've got an ask. They've got a call to action. They want you to do something. They're going to tell you a story that supports that call to action. And so that's what they're doing. They're trying to appeal to your heart and mind about making a decision and making it now. So that's a little bit about what words also you choose to use, right? There are certain words you can use that invoke more action than others. Even your body language can signify sales. So if you watch salespeople carefully, they nod this a lot. And before you know it, you're doing the same thing. And before you know it, you're saying the same thing. You're like, how'd they get me to say yes to that? And there is an art to that. If you go to a sales psychology training class, they talk about the art of the nonverbal cues. Remember, 55% It's not 7% is what I'm saying to you. 55% is I'm nodding. I'm asking you yes questions, getting you to say yes more than you're going to say no in certain times. So it's all part of the design. It's all part of their preparation. It's part of the research they did on who's going to be in the audience. They've done their research on the psychology of buying, and they're putting all of those things together in their words, their body language, and their voice to get you to do what they want you to do. And if you've ever been in those rooms, you see flocks of people going to drop lots of dollars that they didn't plan to spend on the psychology. Now, many of them, when they get home, probably have buyer's remorse, but he's already gone to the bank with your money, so he's accomplished his job. But no, that's a great question. So I'm not going to have a money story for you today, per se. I will provide some solutions that you may choose to partake in. So again, Les Brown gets asked this all the time, is there such thing as a natural speaker? And his comment is, show me a natural heart surgeon. You probably don't want the natural heart surgeon, right? So his point here is, it took tons of years and study and hours and practice for them to be a good heart surgeon. The same applies to being a great speaker. And what becomes natural to the speaker is a lot of the things you practice now become subconscious behaviors. I no longer have to really work on how am I gesturing because I've practiced it so much, I just do it. I don't have to work on voice inflection at this point. I've practiced it so much, you just do it. So when they become subconscious behaviors and habits, you will come across to your audience as a natural speaker. But you and I both know, you spent hours, maybe years perfecting your ability to stand up and speak or have a good conversation and engage people. So that's kind of my conclusion on the natural speaking side of things. So I want to do another quick exercise for you guys. It's kind of hard. I didn't plan on all these plates here, but take one of these pieces of paper for me if you would. We're gonna make it work. And it just further reinforces this practice, repetition, learning, preparation. Does everybody have a pen? I hope. I think I have a couple. Who needs a pen? These are my high-tech pens, so I want them back. No, just kidding. They're my favorite pens. They're not high-tech. Who else needed one? Do you need one? Who else needed one? Did anybody else need one? Everybody else good? Okay, so what I want you to do, okay. With your non-dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, you're going to do this with your left hand. If you're left-handed, you're going to do it with your right hand. And I want you to practice writing and saying out loud at the same time, so it's going to get a little noisy. I love writing, and I love signing my name, and then I want you to sign your name with your non-dominant hand.
We write the sentence with our regular hand?
No, with your left hand.
All of it.
All of it with your opposite hand. Everything with your opposite hand. So you're going to say it while you're writing. I love writing, and I love signing my name, and then you're going to sign your name with your non-dominant hand. Yeah. Bless you. I don't hear y'all. I'm going to do it too. I love writing, and I love signing my name. So either you're really good or you have poor penmanship on both, right? Now when you're done, so number one, how natural did that feel?
Not natural.
Weird, right? Very uncomfortable. All right, do the same thing with your regular hand. I love writing and I love signing my name. Well, it could mean two things. So take a look at both of the handwritings. Is there a dramatic difference, or is there some close similarities between the two? So it's a dramatic difference. But when you did it with your right hand, you pretty much just flowed, right? Yeah. But you use your dominant hand all the time, right? It's quicker. It was quicker. Yours are pretty close. Are you ambidextrous? Is that the word? How you say it?
A lot of things, but not right with my hand.
Okay.
I do a lot of
So mine looks not too far apart, but I actually, in high school when I used to get bored in a class, I used to doodle. So I used to start practicing writing with my left hand. I would just write my name. I would have sheets and sheets of paper of just stuff written in my left hand to the point where I can write decent with my left hand. It's still uncomfortable, but I could, if I needed to kind of forge my name with the left hand, I could do it. I can do it. Yeah, okay, that's a better example. That's a better example. So again, my point is, if you're doing something for the first time, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be natural. But with time, do you believe you could get pretty good penmanship with your left hand if you worked at it?
So the second time was a little better.
Little better, right, because every time you're exercising a new muscle, right? It's the same thing. Yep. All right, so we look very natural at things that are habitual is the bottom line. So again, if you get the comment, oh my gosh, you're just natural at that, what they're really saying, or what it really means is you've done it enough times that it looks simple to the person watching you. But when you try something for the first time, it's uncomfortable, right? Okay. Have you ever talked to anybody and they say, well, I don't really like to prepare. I just kind of like to shoot from the hip and I just want to talk from the heart. I don't really want this preparation thing. So is that bad? Is that a bad thing to want to speak from the heart?
No.
Okay. Could be.
Because, I mean, if I went to a meeting this morning, I thought it was going to be an awesome talk about the Fidelity Ameris Bank merger.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy just stood there and was like, hey, y'all, I've been with Fidelity since '74. And I mean, like, that was it.
Yeah, and you were like, what?
I'm like, oh, glad I got up early for that.
Right. So, speaking from the heart, depending upon the setting, could be great because it's a great way, again, to connect and engage the audience. The key is not to spend your entire time allotment speaking from the heart or what we'll say from the hip. So John Maxwell, who's the #1 non-celebrity speaker, says he spends about 10% just speaking from the heart or just, having some fluid with the audience. But only 10%, the rest is all prepared content, even though it doesn't sound like it. He's very conversational. He tells a lot of stories. So it's not bad. So a quote says, you can only fight the way you train at the end of the day. So you can't expect to go in and rock the house if you haven't rocked the house. You can't go in and start, fighting southpaw and you've been doing, the other direction in practice. We tell our boys all the time in soccer practice, you have volunteer coaches. It's like, why are you yelling at them in the game to do this when you didn't do it in practice?
Right.
They're not going to do it in the game. It's pressure time. So you perform the way you practice. It's a good, and that applies to everything we do, and it definitely applies to speaking. So I love that quote. So at the end of the day, when people say I want to talk from the heart, they really are saying I want to be interesting. I want to make sure I'm connecting. So John is talking to one of the master coaches here, and he said, hey, it doesn't take a lot more to be interesting, but it does take a lot more. But it does take more. So you have to be intentional to be interesting, right? I could have stood up here, and hopefully I didn't do this, and I could have read you all my notes and been very blah, gave no examples, and just said you need to know your material, and you need to know your audience. That'd have been very boring, right? But hopefully we made it interesting, and it was, a fun way to talk about the topic. So I want to show you this. So this is an 88-minute keynote that John Maxwell gave, and this breaks down the content of his talk. Now, I want you to notice a couple things. Teaching material was barely 12 minutes of the 88 minutes. Isn't that incredible? Because if you ask me to speak for 88 minutes, I'm surely going to be like, well, I got to at least have half some teaching and some key concepts and what have you. 63% of this is stories. And if you guys ever listen to him, he talks a lot in stories. He teaches through his stories. But pure principles and concepts, 11 minutes worth. The rest, he's telling you stories. So that's why you're mesmerized by what he's talking about, because he's telling you stories. Or he's telling you hypothetical stories, or he's telling you somebody else's stories, or he's sharing with you some statistics. Laminate, it means he's got somebody else's story. That's what it means. I had to go check that too. I'm like, what's a laminated card? It's telling other people's stories. So he might have to read it so that he's collected them. And then 12% was other. But isn't that incredible? I know it changed. It's like, wow, because naturally I'm not a big storyteller. But I've been trying to be more intentional about, yeah, exactly, absolutely, and learn. Because something that you say, they can connect to that story. They're like, oh yeah, that's happened to me. That makes sense now. Versus saying, do this, right? And it makes it real. So I thought you guys would enjoy kind of seeing that and take that and apply it to your, and it doesn't mean you have to be a keynote to tell stories. You can tell stories in your meetings. You can tell stories on the conference call to get a complex, change or business issue through to the other side and make it a little more lighthearted, not so serious all the time, right? So introduce storytelling into everything that you do. And it could just be even a personal example. Hey, this is how it showed up for me in my life. So I thought that was pretty impactful to see it that way. Otherwise, this might happen to you. That's not a picture of you guys, is it? But we've all been in meetings or talks where we felt that way or looked that way. Okay, so we don't want your audience to look like that, okay? So there's this concept called payoffs. Anybody heard the concept called payoffs? And payoffs is just strictly a term for changing the energy in your talk. So if you get a lull, you want to pop them with something. Maybe it's a story, not pop them literally, like wake up. But you might tell a dramatic story to change the energy level in the room. You might tell them something that makes them go, wow, or awe. Maybe it's a sad story. So you're going to take them a little bit on this emotional journey with you. So you don't keep the energy like this. So you see those spikes. So every few minutes you need to spike with something, a personal story, a statistic, an exercise, things of that nature. Funny, something funny. Humor always lightens the room up, right? But you have to do things that fit your personality, because if it's not you, it won't come across well, right? So I tend to stay away from the jokes. But those are what they call payoffs, and you want to plan payoffs intentionally. So no matter what your subject is, how can you shift energy and insert things like statistics, a story, somebody else's story into your presentation? And that's what you're seeing over here. There was another chart. They actually plotted a diagram of 35 different elements of that 88-minute speech and how he used personal story, a teaching, a hypothetical, a statistic, and they kind of diagrammed that. And so it's pretty interesting. That's what makes John Maxwell's method of teaching speaking very interesting and unique from the rest of the marketplace. So, in conclusion, do you guys believe anyone can learn to speak? Yep. Do you believe that you can learn to speak, elevate your speaking in this room? You might be excellent at it. Did you pick up something that you can apply to your own speaking opportunities, whether it be the small day-to-day interactions or the big stage interactions that you can take away? You can tell a story on your next conference call. Yeah. You can lead with a story that's directly related to what you're going to talk to them about. So, the keys that we really talked about is it can be learned, preparation is key, practice is key, and the repetition of doing it over and over and over again until it becomes pretty much part of your subconscious, habitual, that you don't have to think about everything that you're doing.